The panel today really is on the B2C marketplace, and we're going to try to have a look both at the effect of the short-term repercussions of what's happening in the B2C marketplace, the long-term realities and issues facing B2C, and we're going to make sure that the four panelists get a chance to tell you a little bit about some of the lessons that they've learned and some realities about their own companies. I do have an iPad with questions, so if you do have any questions, I think there's a way you can submit your questions on techweek.cnf.io. So let's get started. I'll let each panelist introduce themselves as we go through the panel. But really, the first question that I want to ask the panel is a short-term reality, is sort of, what are you seeing right now as a result of some of the changes in the B2C marketplace? Since the first internet bubble, we've heard retail's going away, the retail world is changing, the way consumers are buying things is changing, the internet's changed the whole world, and a number of times we've heard you'll never purchase anything at retail again, or you'll change the world. And today we live in a very confused world. We have here in Toronto, Yorkdale, which is probably one of the most successful malls in the world, but at the same time Sears is closing down, and large retailers are closing down, and Amazon seems to have a box outside everybody's front door at the same time, and is now, with their purchase of Whole Foods, is sort of going through some other issues. So the first question I'd like each panelist to address immediately after introducing themselves is, what's going on out there? Like, what do you think is the reality of the B2C marketplace?
I guess I'll start with that one. Hi, everyone. My name's Andrew Sider. I'm the CEO of Virage Sale. Virage Sale is a fun and safer way to buy and sell secondhand goods. We were founded by Tammy. Tammy's in the audience. Give a little shout out. And really, it's think of it as the Airbnb of classifieds. We wrap an identity experience around buying and selling hyper locally, so that you can buy and sell at ease with less friction, and it creates like a really cool community effect and some passionate users. So check it out if you haven't. My opinion on this topic and some things that we think a lot about at our business, I think I'll share three thoughts. One is Amazon is changing consumer expectations around shipping. We used to live in a world where we sort of would put up with 7 to 14-day shipping. And now, in some countries, you have 1 to 2 hour options. And so if you're a B2C player, particularly in our business, if you're a marketplace and there's more friction between getting your product into the consumer's hands, maybe like in our case, we don't control the end-to-end logistics, we need to be very considerate of how our company rides that consumer changing expectation. So if you look at a company like Airbnb, I think they've done a cool job tackling this with their product. If you were an early user in Airbnb, you used to send 30 messages to book someone's spare bedroom. You'd go back and forth over logistics. You tried to exchange phone numbers. Airbnb would block that because they didn't want you to pay them cash. Today, there's an instant checkout button. It's one click. It's as easy as booking on a hotel. And it's reducing that friction in that sort of marketplace environment that allows them to compete with the Expedias of the world. So that's something that we're thinking a lot about, is how do you reduce friction in a marketplace scenario? The second thing I'll say, it sounds obvious, but I think it needs to be hit home. Everyone here knows retail is going online, but I don't think everyone realizes how quickly it's going to mobile apps. Last 2 years, the shopping category in the App Store grew 50 to 60%. In both years, one of the top growing App Store categories. And if you look at a lot of incumbent players in the space, a lot of their traffic is still based on web. So mobile app and mobile capabilities, if you're building a new company or you're trying to disrupt a space, are key. Users are heading that way, and it's surprising how many incumbent players haven't made that shift or investment because of legacy revenues or legacy infrastructure. Virage Sale is an example. We're in a space where incumbent activity is almost exclusively on web. Look at Craigslist. They don't even have an app, and they have no plans for an app. Virage Sale is 95% mobile app traffic. And so if I pose that to the business owners and marketers in the audience, is think about how that plays into the core competencies in the future traffic opportunities for your business.
Brandon Koffler, co-founder and CEO of Fan Exchange. I have my other co-founder here, Sean. Sean, say hello. So we're not your traditional B2C market. I mean, we look at ourselves more as B2B2C. So we power live event ticket solutions and a number of different products for multiple different distribution channels across the loyalty space, financial institutions, travel and hotel providers, e-commerce solutions, et cetera. So we are not necessarily direct to consumer, but we help power and optimize the way with which our clients reach their consumer. And how we do that is really through relevant content, personalization, data and analytics, et cetera. But from our perspective, we have pretty much a zero cost per customer acquisition. What's interesting, how you see the landscape shifting, and Mark and I were just talking about this very briefly right before I got on stage, is you're seeing big companies like Airbnb or a lot of the different OTAs out there who are traditionally selling one or two products or services. In the case of the OTAs like Expedia or Priceline or Trivago or any of them, even Airbnb, traditionally selling, let's say, accommodations or strictly travel. Now you see them looking at other ancillary revenue opportunities, trying to own the entire travel space as opposed to just selling one product. You see a big push with Airbnb to move into experiences, local activities, things to do. And so from our perspective, we're partnering with a number of different distribution verticals, different distribution channels, and mostly digital, actually primarily entirely digital, where we can streamline the way with which consumers access live event tickets. And so we want to surface live event tickets on channels where consumers are already engaged in commerce and content. And you're seeing that shift more and more now with a lot of the different distribution partners we're working with.
Hi, I'm Mike Geddes, CEO of Endy. We provide a mattress direct to customers, compressed and rolled in a box, and we primarily sell online. To the question in terms of retail and what that is, our goal is really to be a disruptor towards the old industry. But the retail is still a very big part of the mattress industry. For us, we've changed it around in terms of the way we do it, in terms of having showrooms and things like this for people to try. But as the e-commerce trend continues for us, instead of being a marketplace like some of the other members of the panel, we've really focused on a single SKU. We've added a few others, such as pillows and sheets are coming. But our goal is to achieve market penetration via our vertical e-commerce model. One of the big things we've seen compared to, say, Amazon, a lot of people have an okay experience with it in Canada. One of the reasons is not all the products are actually in Canada when you order them. So one of our competitive advantages is the fact that for Canadians, we serve our product shipped from Canada, made in Canada, and that's been a big thing for us to leapfrog what our American counterparts are trying to do in the same space. And so in terms of the retail thing, I think we still see, I don't think just because Sears is going down that retail is going to die overnight. Trees don't grow to the sky, but also they don't fall into the pit like with retail declining. These are trends that are occurring, but it's going to settle back out, and we really see that there's an omni-channel presence that's very important, and this has been key even in the past with e-commerce as being now a prevalent channel. It's going to be one of a few, but I do think it will become more of a dominant player in terms of the way people buy things, especially based on convenience, but also based on the fact that you can get better products a lot of times than you can with the old style, where they say in the mattress industry, a lot of people were overcharging, and it was about a limitation of access, that at your mattress store, the local one, you only had a few options that you actually could get to. So nowadays with e-commerce, that will become far more competitive, and I think this will happen in other verticals, not just in mattresses.
Hi, my name is Nikolai, and I run a company called OpenCare. We're a digital healthcare concierge focused on dental care. And what we do in a nutshell, we match patients with vetted healthcare providers or vetted dentists. And the way we vet them, we aggregate a lot of data on every healthcare provider, everything from every review that has ever been written about them to professional misconduct data, education, experience, and etc. That's the first filter. Then we actually inspect clinics in person and interview providers. And what we're able to achieve with that is we get Net Promoter Score post-dental appointment higher than iPhone gets or Netflix gets. So our in-house joke that we made people love dentistry more than their iPhones and Netflix, which usually dental experience and enjoyable, those two words don't come together in the same sentence. So what we're thinking, or what we're seeing a lot, or thinking a lot about, first off, I think what Andrew touched on, the consumer expectations have drastically changed, and our primary demographic that we're targeting are millennials, and that's like the first generation that grew up with technology from their teen years. As a result, they're actually used to technology and they're open purchasing and transacting online. And what's happening with that is the expectations are so high up that transaction has to be so easy. And as a result, what we're seeing as well, everybody's trying to shift to transacting and doing business online. As a result, there's so much noise. And with that noise, one big thing that we're observing, actually building a consumer brand or online consumer brand got extremely expensive. Previously, 10 years ago, you could start a business, raise your $1.5 million seed round and actually deliver quite a bit. Now $1.5 million in a consumer business does nothing. One thing we're observing, consumer marketplaces, we consider ourselves consumer marketplace, have to raise double seeds or like massive seeds or raise like early A's and etc. It's because it's so expensive now to acquire consumer. And a third thing, there was this concept of growth hacking that people still talk about, but I think it's really on a decline. People were exploiting different things in technology, and I think that window is closing up. And as well as the problem with growth hacking, it's almost impossible to build a consumer brand using that. So 5-10 years ago, you could find an exploit in a platform and really build up a brand by acquiring users very cheaply. Hence, you don't need to raise as much money. Now, first of all, you cannot do it, or if you can do it, you can only get so far where it's not enough to build a large enough business. Hence, we see companies need to raise substantially more money and shift to much more holistic, traditional way of thinking about marketing, which CPG companies do a great job about, but we're seeing that tech startups are not necessarily. It's all about where do I find a new thing to get a user very cheap without communicating the right messaging and really representing the brand in the right light.
Great, thank you. Shifting gears a little bit, sort of taking a longer-term view on the marketplace, we're seeing some interesting trends in the marketplace. We're seeing the very large players, sort of the Googles, Amazons, Facebooks of the world, going through growth like startups. They seem to be doubling in size, and the big five or big 10, whatever we want to call them, seem to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Sort of based on some of the questions I'm getting from the audience and some of the feedback, how do you compete in this? Like, how do you think you survive in a world of these big players? Can you survive, or are we always going to be at the mercy of Facebook and Google forcing us to spend a certain amount of money, sort of keeping us in business? You can start from the beginning, or anybody just jump in as you like.
Yeah, I mean, to Nikolai's point earlier about raising, a meaningful amount of capital, especially as a marketplace, a consumer-facing marketplace. I mean, we went through those challenges early on as well. I think to answer the question more specifically, I mean, you have to differentiate yourself from the competitors. You have to look for a model that works for you. Obviously, product market fit, but really just look for a model that works for you and differentiates yourself from what's out there. For us, when Sean and I founded the company back in '08, launched in '09. Our original model was actually direct to consumer. And, for us, we did the family and friends round and the seed and the angels and, our Series A. And, we didn't really raise our first institutional capital until our B round. But we very quickly realized that in order to compete with the major marketplaces out there and the major consumer brands out there at the time, StubHub had just recently been acquired by eBay. This is going back to 2007, 2008. And no one was really focused on the Canadian landscape. And so when Sean and I founded it, our original vision was, hey, let's educate Canadian consumers about a safe and secure marketplace where they can transact and buy and sell tickets to live events, et cetera. And we quickly, very, very quickly realized that in order to compete on customer acquisition, we would need to raise a war chest of capital. And so we were very fortunate that we actually were approached shortly after we went live and shortly after we launched in '09 by a major loyalty reward program provider. And that program provider was managing a number of different programs, loyalty programs for financial institutions. TD Bank was their largest client at the time. And they had said to us, hey, help us solve a challenge. The number one most requested item outside of travel is, can we redeem our loyalty currency for live event tickets? And so at the time, we didn't think much of it other than, hey, this is just another distribution channel for us. We can build the brand, we'll sell some more tickets, et cetera. So we built out the technology and the APIs, allowed them to ingest the inventory, and we saw some really meaningful conversion rates. And they were doing all of the marketing to their consumer. So again, zero cost per customer acquisition for us. There was a revenue share, so any ticket sold, we would pay them for those sales, but they were in charge of doing all the marketing to their consumers. And so that's really when the light bulbs went off for us. And we said, wow, what does this look like at scale? At the time, it was like a TD Bank employee recognition program. I think there was like 50,000 employees using the program. We said to ourselves, okay, what if we went south of the border and looked at some of the major loyalty programs or other distribution verticals that have 30, 40, 50, 60 million members? What would that look like at scale? And, if we built out really incredible products that were focused on creating not just ancillary revenue opportunities for our partners, but really a value-added service for their users and a great experience, how could we scale that? And we started batting like 100%. Every program operator we went after and said, hey, let us build out a great product for you. Let us help you sell live event tickets to all of your users, whether it be in the loyalty space or travel or hotel providers or e-commerce. And there was a ton of engagement there. And that was our way of differentiating ourselves at the time. And, sure enough, fast forward to where we are today, very fortunately, we've become the market leader on the B2B side. And that's really how we try to tackle and differentiate ourselves from the major B2C giants out there. In our case, it was StubHub. Many marketplaces, it is the Amazons and the Walmarts and the eBays, et cetera.
I echo that experience. I find that a lot of large incumbents, the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, they think big and then they launch big. And when you launch big, it's hard to know exactly what need you're solving and go really deep on it. I think the advantage of a startup and the way new upstarts need to act is think big, start really small. And it's hard to do. It's hard to confine your vision to something which feels so small. But that wedge strategy allows you to identify an underserved niche and to build a product around that use case, which can slowly eat into other verticals as you evolve over time, but allow you to get the flywheel going with that user so you can compete on user acquisition, so you can go deeper with a specific set of features. So that
Andrew, can you give us an example of how that's worked for you?
Sure. I mean, for us, Virage Hill, I think, is an example of this. We've focused on a safety message around a trust-based system. And when we go into a new city, moms really resonate with that promise. And a combination of our hyper-locality allows them to sell small everyday items, often related to children or the home. And the identity focus gives them the comfort that they can meet new people in a secure environment. And so that gives us this wedge of users who is underusing or not using at all existing classified services. what we found over time as we mature into markets, we just become the best place to buy and sell in a city. If you go to some cities like Regina, Calgary, Victoria, we have replaced classifieds platforms. And the way that we've done this is by creating a niche with a lot of great activity and word of mouth, which initially was moms. Eventually, moms tell their husbands, and then the kids know, and then their group of friends know, which has resulted in some cities where some of our fastest growing categories are auto sales, and the male demographic usage is growing. But it wasn't without being patient. It's taken time and a lot of focus. And you always, as an entrepreneur, you always want to think big. You always want to creep from your lane because you want to eat the world. But I think that thinking small to start it is important.
Yeah, I echo some of the things you went through from what you're talking of. One of our key things is to penetrate our market space, it's about focus, and having a sharp point will penetrate better than trying to use a battering ram. I think what ends up happening is there's to start a company that you have to try a bunch of different things at the beginning, and an ADD can kind of set in a little bit. And you have to say, okay, let's pick, we're going to pick mattresses. We're going to focus on mattresses. We're not going to add a suite of products to start. We're going to focus on a single channel that we're going to own. So we'll try a few, we'll find one that works well, and then we're going to do it better because the big companies are focused on 10 channels to market. So for us, a big thing was Facebook. We got going on Facebook. But to Nikolai's point, then you get a signal to noise issue over time where there's so many different other offerings and there's so much happening on that particular platform that you have to spend more and more money to stay ahead of it. So a big thing that we've done for our customer acquisition to build is to look at it sort of as a layer cake approach where we've started with one channel. We've really tried to own that channel. It was Facebook to start. And then as the noise began to grow, we started moving to a new channel and growing. So now we're looking really a lot at offline marketing. So we're looking at our acquisition there and how, in terms of the online mattress space, how can we do that and own that space and get better clarity. I think a key part is the focus in all areas, like the clarity around the messaging as well. How can you stand out from your competitors? A lot of it is just by being very, very clear on what your value proposition is. We work on that all the time to try to get that to a better place. In order to compete against different segments and whatnot, I think this gives that barrier that at the end of it, it's very clear what you are. You have very clear channels in which you own, and then over time you can build that layer cake to the point that then you have a multi-channel type thing. You've grown to a big enough size. The challenges do change at that point where you then need to think a little bit about your cross-channel strategies, and we're getting to that point now where how do we work the channels together so that it works well, that it syncs together. Also, in terms of demographics, we had our original group that we were targeting. Over time, they become more expensive because they've seen more and more of your ads and you out there in the space. So then what's your next channel, and digging into that in terms of who's buying your product, why are they buying it, what other type of analogous segments could you look at? And that's the phase where we've got to today.
Mike, a question from the audience is, what will it take for a publisher to break the stranglehold Google and Facebook have on digital user acquisition budgets? Are you finding that because they sort of seem to
They absolutely
in sync raising their prices together, how do you break out of that?
They absolutely have a stranglehold. Facebook released their earnings recently, and they announced that they've seen a saturation in terms of the number of placements on the Facebook platform. So early stage, this was a little bit of our version of a growth hack where we saw that it was quite cheap to get people to click on an ad off of Facebook. But Google did the same thing, that as they saturated their ad space, they started charging more for the ad space. So it comes down to your strategy. If you're a startup, you may not win necessarily with a small budget on these channels. We're at the phase where we're looking at more scale, so we could win by having more scale on these channels. The prices will continue to grow, but I think also it's worth looking at new trends that are coming out and looking at new types of things that you can advertise on online that aren't necessarily Google and Facebook. They're still going to own it for some time.
Can you give us some examples?
We haven't spread too far from it. We've looked at some things like Snapchat and whatnot. I think the issue is you can easily go down a rabbit hole with some of those. It depends, like you set up, say, a Snapchat filter. We were testing that just this week. But we haven't been able to monetize it yet, so we're careful with it. I think we also want to keep our focus, so there's a bit of a balance of forces there.
Thank you.
So I guess going on the original point, I think Mark made a very interesting statement that it's the world is very different now with some of the big technology companies and the way they operate and the speed of growth. And the key thing that I wanted to kind of distill from that, it's actually very different to compete with them than previous so-called legacy companies. I think it's impossible to compete on features technology anymore because Google, Facebook, they have more engineers than all of the companies in this room put together. So we're seeing an interesting battle right now between Facebook and Snapchat, where Snapchat is really feature difference, and Facebook can catch up to the feature parity very quickly and has a distribution. So anyone who is playing in a consumer space and purely basing their differentiation or competitive advantage on features or like unique experience created by features or technology, that all is dead because the big players have distribution and have more engineers than you are. So I think the key there, as was already stated, is zooming in, but to distill the insights from that for consumer marketplaces or offerings, the key competitive advantage is actually unique supply. Do you have something unique to offer to the consumer? So Airbnb, for example, offers very unique properties that you cannot find anywhere else. In our scenario, we're offering access to very well vetted dentists, which is very difficult to do for any large-scale company. So if Google wants to come into that game, which they're already forcing themselves into with their local listings and Google's map, and that coming up above the organic search results, we dominate top results in search, but what they've done, they shifted the map from the side to the top. That can significantly drop click-through for us because people actually look at those clinics. But what's playing to the advantage of a small company is the first stage of the web was putting things on a web, digitizing. The second stage was indexing the web. Let's organize it. And the third stage that now we have so much more information and it's all indexed is curate. And that's where I think the opportunity is, really curate the supply and deliver access to unique supply. And that's what the true competitive advantage could be for a small player. And building on that, so that's one way of zooming in. Then you can start zooming in the offering that was mentioned here, so only sell mattress. We went from offering access to every specialty to only offering access to dentistry, and we'll be focused on dentistry until we truly dominate that industry, and then expand the same offering to other specialties. Beyond that, you can zoom in even further. You can take a geography. We go on a city-by-city rollout basis. So, and when it comes to marketing, you can actually, as a small startup, you can outspend big boys on marketing when it comes to single city, single specialty. No big player will spend the same budget on a single, in our scenario, and it's a specialty in a scenario of other companies, could be other offering. No, they cannot outspend single category, single geography when it comes to the competition and advertising. So there's quite a few levers where you can truly zoom in, and that really creates that competitive advantage. And once you dominate and nail one category, one geography, you can either take it to the next geography or you can take it to the next category, whatever is the right strategy for your business. And that's, I think, is one of the things that we still see working, but otherwise, if you're competing on features or technology-enabled experience, it's almost impossible to compete with big guys.
Thank you. So we have a chance to go through one more opportunity through the panel. There's a lot of people in the audience who are either starting up a business or getting a business started or thinking about becoming an entrepreneur or thinking of going down this road. The four of you have been in it for a while. You've got businesses that are now growing and are out there. If you could share something that the audience can learn from, what experiences you had? We know it's never a straight line. We know there's one day it's the best thing in the world, and the next day you wonder why the hell you're doing it. But if you could share something that you've learned that you think this audience would appreciate, and go away with a lesson learned, what would that be?
So I'm going to echo what I said before. Think big, start really small. It's anti-entrepreneur to do. Like, it's just not in our DNA. You have to force yourself to do it. Think really hard about who you're serving, why they care, and they have to care 10 times more than the next best alternative. Otherwise, you don't stand a chance to acquire a user because you don't solve the need well enough. Once you have that figured out, go raise money. And with that money, you want to think long and hard about acquisition. I do relate to Nikolai's comment. I think growth hacking, for the large part, is dead. And so user acquisition is challenging. Think about it one channel at a time. Start at a channel, give it a test budget in some months, and get really, really good at it. If you don't figure it out in 2 to 3 months, I think that's a good time to switch. We've heard some of the panelists talk about, you can feel scattered because you're testing a lot of stuff. That's a good approach, but make sure you're giving things long enough to work. And lastly, set aside test marketing budgets for new channels. I think we're seeing things emerge, and it's not clear what the next Google and Facebook advertising platform is going to be. Snapchat is available, I think, via beta for ad testing. Pinterest has a few ad formats out. We're seeing chat emerge as a platform. VR, we don't know what that's going to be yet as a future platform. As a marketing group in your team, you need to be reserving some budget and mind share to think about what is the next best channel to tap, because that might be, your early Facebook channel, the channel that you can stand out on. And so that's how I would frame your early company development. Think hard about your focus, and then be scientific about your advertising testing.
It's an interesting question, Mark. I guess I would say to the audience what I would share with my immediate family or friends that ask the same question about building and operating a business. I mean, there's no such thing as overnight success, period. It just doesn't happen. You got to work hard. You have to stay focused. You have to persevere. You're going to have your challenges. You're going to have your ups, your downs, the bumps in the road. You'll take 2 steps forward. You'll take 1 step back. You'll have, wrenches thrown at you all the time. Nothing will come easy. But at the end of the day, if you're passionate about what you're doing, you believe in what you're doing, then stay focused. Go to work and love what you do every day, and remain passionate about it. And sky's the limit. In terms of customer acquisition, just listening to what everyone has to say, I would give, one of the key insights that we've learned most recently and, over the last 12 or 18 months is we've spent a ton of time on the data and analytics portion, on just understanding the data and the customer and consumer profile, customer behavior. In our case, we have access to so much data and everything about the tickets and the inventory and the price trends. And so it's, for us, where we've seen the most success is really personalizing that experience, putting the right message in front of the right user at the right time, and make it highly relevant. Quick examples, some of the cool things we're doing with some of our partners. Groupon's a big partner of ours, so we power all of the secondary live event tickets that are on Groupon. One of the things we recently launched a new product about 2 weeks ago, and we're already seeing really great conversion rates on it, is price trending. So what we're able to do is to take all the data that we had about tickets and the ticket life cycle and the price history, and we would take a period of time, let's say over the last 14 days, and we'd be able to tell you what's happening in the market with that ticket. First and foremost, at the highest level, at a team level, so we can tell you, hey, Jay's tickets over the last 14 days have gone down X%, or this particular game that's happening on Saturday against the Yankees has dropped 17%. And then we can get even more granular with the data, and we can tell you that, this particular section and this particular row at this particular venue, the price has either decreased or increased. And then you create this sense of urgency or this impulse purchase. We also look at purchase behavior with respect to, what time of the day are people purchasing? When are people purchasing? We can tell you that, on average, 26% of our users are buying live event tickets the day of the event. That number jumps to about 51% within 72 hours of the event. So it's really just understanding the customer, understanding the consumer, putting the right messaging in front of that user, will help you with your customer acquisition.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm going to use a fishing analogy. If any of you, I'm a catch and release fisherman, by the way, for the audience. But so I think part of it is that it's very tempting. Like when I was a kid and I first started fishing, I went and picked my favorite lure out of the store, and I went out to the fishing spot, and I really didn't catch anything. I didn't really know where to go. It was a new pond, that sort of thing. So I think over time, what I really started to realize, and the same thing in starting a new business, is that you really have to get attuned with your market and your customer. And I think you have the biggest challenge is trying to eliminate your own bias a little bit in terms of figuring out what that is. For us with ND, like a big thing for us actually was setting up our showroom. And what helped is that customers were coming into our office, and we were having a few challenges with customer acquisition. We had some things that were working okay, some things that weren't working amazingly well. And I think what we realized is more and more what they wanted. And say, it's easy for me to be like, well, if I was to buy a mattress, I would do this, 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 and this. You talk to the customer, and they have a whole different set of challenges. So then we could realign our business towards the customer, and especially towards our demographic. So that's definitely a big thing in terms of getting going and starting a business.
Yeah, I think I'd like to underline once again very critical point about zooming in and focus. And early on, the way Paul Graham puts it, do things that do not scale, and really zoom into the smallest unit possible and do something extremely well in that, and measure it, net promoter score, whatever other usage metrics, and etc., and make sure something is working and you're serving a small population exceptionally well. That will give you an indication that you have product market fit. As part of that, the key thing, the mistake we made, and we see a lot of other companies making, and it was a very interesting discussion at one of our board meetings. We were hiring a full-time user researcher. We're just under 20 people, and they're like, are you fucking crazy? Like, you're 20 people, I'm 300 people, and I just hired my first user researcher. And we saw fundamentally that was a key role to really get into consumer minds, especially when you're trying to distill how they feel, what they think is exceptionally difficult. It's not the same as B2B, where you actually come to a user gets paid to think about their problems 8 hours a day. Consumer doesn't think about their problems. If you ask them directly what the issue is, how they buy the mattress, how they find a dentist, they'll just like puke out a bunch of information that is completely irrelevant, and it's not exactly what they do. So investing, like really zooming in and truly understanding your user is critical. And the challenge, I guess, with founders is we think we're really smart. There's a little bit of an ego, and we think we fucking know the user, and we think we are the user, and that really gets in the way. And this user researcher will create the right checks and balances to make sure, we're not building a product for ourselves, but truly for the market that's out there. From there, once you have that product market fit and you have data, raise as much money as possible. And consumer space right now is bloodbath. And if you don't have capital, you are irrelevant unless you're in like a very unique situation, which is very rare. But once you raise that capital, what we've observed, and multiple times, people would raise a lot of money and think their business is validated. So they just start spending that capital left and right. They burn through it, and the business didn't really make the progress it needs for the next raise. So we've learned from one of our close friends and board members. They are a $2 billion company. They raised over $300 million. Most of that money that they raised is still in a bank account. And I was like, dude, you're sitting on $200 million. Why aren't you scaling faster? It was like, we're scaling at the pace that we should be scaling. So getting the war chest of capital is important, but it's important to spend it exceptionally well. So fiscal discipline is really critical. And from there, hopefully you have product market fit, you have the true insights into your market and the user, you have the capital, and if you're thoughtful the way you deploy the capital, you should be able to get to the next milestone.
Thank you. So I think you heard a common theme of patience, raise capital, be very focused, and sort of the approach of taking a test-proven scale towards everything that you do and deal with the data. I'm going to end off here because we've run out of time. I just wanted to sort of end with two pieces. Firstly, there's a bunch of very specific questions to the individual companies, which I'm not going to delve into asking them those particular questions, but go afterwards. Other than the one question from Mike is, do you sleep on an Andy mattress?
Oh yeah, it's
There
the
you
best
go.
mattress I've ever slept on.
I do
Of course,
that would be the
I built it
facts,
for myself.
at least one person in the audience wanted to know. I did want to end off with a notion that we've been investing for just over 18 years in the Toronto marketplace, in the Toronto tech marketplace, and we have never seen a better environment than we're seeing today. We're seeing so many more repeat entrepreneurs, so much more quality, so much more expertise, and so much more talent at every level, and an infrastructure that's being built out. And all I can encourage any of you sort of going into this marketplace is to listen carefully to what the panelists spoke about having a lot of patience and making sure that you get it right. Our best portfolio company, we've been invested for just over 10 years, and we'll probably be there for a couple of years further, and we don't actually mind because the payoff is so good. Not that that's what you should focus on, but that is the reality that this takes a long time. But there is no better time for delving into the tech community and to starting businesses and getting going in the Toronto marketplace. We have a fabulous environment right now. So thank you to the panelists, and thank you
you.
to everybody for being here.